One thing I'm really beginning to understand as a man is the degree to which how we feel internally creates our reality. How we feel about what somebody says and what somebody does, how we feel about ourselves, like the emotions that we carry, it creates our reality. If we feel as though we've been disrespected or slighted, we feel as though we have to react to that disrespect or that feeling of being looked past or walked past inside of our body, right? If we feel as though we've been appreciated or we feel as though that we've been taken care of in a really good way, a lot of times we feel the need to reciprocate because of how we perceive we've been treated, right? And so in this conversation of understanding the degree to which emotions really do create, at least my reality, I've also realized a very, very important truth. And that's what we're going to talk about today on the Large and Logic podcast. My name is Avery Taylor. Let's go ahead and get into it. So when we get into this conversation of emotions creating reality, I think it's so important to denote, at least for myself, because as a man, especially growing up, how I grew up and coming through the spaces that I even walk through now, how you feel a lot of times is not talked about or it's not given any true respect, right? And I think that's good in some respects because I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of prioritizing emotions and how we feel and what we think to a degree that's way, way, way too high, right? But also, I think that if you don't talk about how you feel, right? If you don't talk about emotion, if you don't talk about perception, right? You don't talk about that feeling you get in your body, that anxiety that rushes through, that begins to influence you to take that action, you find yourself in a situation where you're ignoring the thing that may be driving a lot of the things that you do and don't do. And so I think that the conversations need to be opened up, and I'm trying to get to a place where I normalize talking about emotion and talk about how I feel and what I think in a transparent way. But there's a caveat. The biggest thing that we have to understand, or I can't tell you what to understand, but the biggest thing that I've grown to understand is this, is that emotions are deceitful. In Jeremiah 17, I believe it talks about how deceitful the heart is, right? How above all things your heart will deceive you. How you feel is honestly an illusion, if you want to say, right? The thing about it is two people can walk into the exact same situation. They can experience the exact same treatment. They can experience the exact same circumstance and perceive it completely differently. Why is that? It's because a lot of times how you interpret a situation, how you read into it, what you get out of it, what you pay attention to, a lot of times is controlled or dictated by your life experience and what you've been trained or conditioned to pay attention to, what you've been trained or conditioned to care about. And so we find ourselves in a situation where when we begin to rely on how we feel, and when I get on my soapbox, right, and I begin to think way too highly of my own thoughts, and I begin to think way too highly of my own emotion, I find myself in a position where, whether it's ethical or not, I've allowed my emotions to begin to dictate my reality, but not only dictate my reality, what I'm experiencing or how I feel as though I'm experiencing it, I also begin to allow it to shift my beliefs. Now, why is that dangerous that I've allowed my reality to be controlled by my emotions and then my beliefs to be influenced by my emotions? That's so dangerous because your beliefs are what dictate your actions. Let's make this a little bit more plain. If you have a nightmare that you were in a shootout or a fight, right? And then you wake up and realize that it was just a dream. Though you still have the anxiety or the adrenaline rushing in your body, you're not going to take any action because you realize that what you felt was only an illusion. It has no true bearing on the circumstance that you're actually in. You're getting up, you're going to sleep, going to work, taking care of your family, your kids, your wife, what have you. Because you realize that it is an illusion inside of your mind, you don't take any action further past just experiencing what took place inside your mind, what took place inside of your body. Now, the issue is, if you were to take that exact same dream, right? You were to take that exact same experience that you experienced inside your mind and inside of your body, and then now go looking for the person in real life that was intending to do you harm in your dream. You're now making true precautions around your life and your family and your habits and how you treat people and how you move because of what you experienced in your mind. This is no different than what happens when we put ourselves in a situation where we begin to allow our emotions to dictate our beliefs. As soon as we begin to allow how we feel to tell us what is right and wrong, as soon as we begin to let how we feel tell us what is real and fake, as soon as we begin to allow how we feel to tell us what the right path is and what the wrong path is, we've just opened the door and allowed all chaos to break loose in our lives. At that point, we have just allowed every type of dysfunction to willfully enter our lives. Because at that point, there is no rhyme or reason for the decisions that we make, truly. You could say good morning to me with a big smile on your face, and you could genuinely mean me well. But if I believe that it's disingenuous and that you're just trying to get something from me, I'm going to respond in a completely inappropriate manner. In the same way, if I'm in need and you try to come to my aid and you mean all the best, if I perceive that you're looking down on me because of my insecurities and how I feel, I may lash out at you. I may become aggressive with you, not because of what you did or your intention, but because of how I perceived the situation, how I felt about what you said, how I felt about what you did, no matter how good it was. And the same is true of the inverse, right? When we're talking about individuals with bad intentions or doing bad things, we can interpret bad as good also because of how we feel about it. We can interpret very dangerous as not so dangerous just because of how we feel about it. How does so many individuals end up on heavy and hard drugs, opioids, crack, lacing blunts? How many people become an alcoholic by accident because it wasn't that serious, it was just a couple drinks? How many people have babies that they can't take care of and STDs and STIs because it was just one time, nobody's gonna know, it's not that serious? How many times do we sin willfully, do the exact same things that we know we're not supposed to do because we have a perception that God really doesn't care, that grace will abound? What I'm trying to get you to see and what I'm finding is that if you're not careful, your emotions and how you feel will create your reality. It not only will create your reality, but it will also dictate what you believe. And what you believe dictates the actions that you take. What you believe has value will dictate what you pursue. What you believe will save you will dictate where you go to look for safety and comfort. What you believe is important will dictate what you prioritize. And if you allow just how you feel to dictate what you believe, you will forever be chasing the wind and it will never stop. And so if this has been you, right? If you have found yourself in a situation where you have been letting your emotions control what you believe, and you've been allowing your emotions to control not only what you believe, but control the actions that you take, and you would like to shift, I'm going to have you do just one thing. And this is what I do. I would like to invite you to stop thinking about how you feel and start focusing on the outcomes you would like to see. And I'm going to take that a step further if I'm making it plain for myself. Don't just focus on your outcomes that you want to see, but I would encourage us to focus on the outcomes that Christ has put before us, gaining perfect self-control, gaining perfect love, having joy even in the worst of situations, taking back control over our mind and submitting it to the power and will of God, to the way of God, taking every thought captive and making it pleasing to God, making it obedient to the will of God. Not only being hearers of the word, right, but being doers. Not just barking and saying stuff, but really being able to give an answer and an account for everything that we believe and that we do. When you take these principles outside of the church context, the Sunday morning context, and you apply them to your life, you stop letting emotions create your beliefs, which dictate your actions. And then you begin to set God-centered outcomes for your life. Being a man that stands 10 toes on principle, regardless of what anybody says or does. Looking fear and pressure in the eye and letting it know it has no power over you. And not because of you, but because of who is working inside of you. It changes the game 100%. And so on today, this is what we're going to do. The next time we feel anxiety inside of our heart, we're going to tell God, I release this to you. In the name of Jesus, I release this situation and this outcome to you. And if God has not directed you toward any other outcome in that situation, a great baseline to always enter into is how can I introduce somebody to Christ through my actions and how I react in this situation. How will my actions, or how can I order myself in this situation to be an example for somebody else when they're in my shoes of how a disciple should walk? This can be a lot easier said than done, but it is so impactful and it is so transformational. People could give a hoot what we say and what we think, but they care about what we do. This is why our actions are so important, and this is why our beliefs are so important. If you were the most angry in the world at somebody, they would never know until your actions show that you're angry. You being attracted to your wife, if you had never made it known that you were attracted to your wife, she would never have known that you wanted her. She might have never had the confidence to want you. It's inside of us until we let it out. And so on today, let's take accountability for how we feel, understand that it's there, but put it in its proper place and prioritize Christ-centered outcome that not only blesses you, but it blesses every single last person around you. My name is Avery Taylor. You are tuned into the Larger Than Logic podcast, and I'm so glad that you've allowed me to be a part of your journey.